I'd like to call the meeting to order and thank everyone for their attendance tonight. Look forward to a good meeting and appreciate everyone coming out. We will start with the invocation by the Reverend Brandon Gilmore, pastor of Nemo United Methodist Church. If everyone would rise for the invocation, and Reverend Gilmore come forward. And after the invocation, if you'd remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend Gilmore, we're glad to have you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let's pray. Father, we come to you this evening thanking you and praising you that you are the God who is everywhere. You're the God who is in our places of worship. You're the God who is in our homes. And you're even the God who shows up here in city chambers. We thank you that you care about your creation, and we thank you that you care about our city, Virginia Beach. We thank you for our servants, our leaders here. We pray that your Spirit will descend upon them this night, that your spirit of listening will descend upon them, your spirit of patience will descend upon them. May you help us all to hear, to understand, and not hear to argue and to fight. May your spirit of discernment and guidance truly be upon us. And may you perform a miracle this night. Help this meeting to be short and sweet, like this prayer. And we pray all of these things in your name, our Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reverend, we really thank you for those good words, and we hope that prayer is answered. Do I have a motion for the certification of the closed session, please?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? I'll call for the question, please.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you have certified the closed session to be in accordance with the motion to recess.
Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the informal and formal sessions of October 6, 2015?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you have approved the minutes as submitted.
Thank you. If I could,
I need to, I
I'm
put
sorry.
yes, I'm so sorry, I pushed yes, but I really wasn't there that day because I was at Richmond at the VML meeting, and I apologize.
thank you very
I'll
much.
give you a verbal abstain. Is that all
We
right?
appreciate it. If I could ask Tara Copeland to come forward, please. And whoever else, I think you've got Unit Commander Staff Sergeant Christopher Martinez, Unit Sergeant Dakota Copeland, Jalen Salazar, and Tashawn Singh Jackson. Well, folks, it's really my pleasure to read this proclamation and thank these wonderful people for what they're doing. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse in this nation have reached epidemic stages, and whereas it's imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate the demand for drugs. Whereas the Young Marines is a drug demand reduction program sponsored by the Marine Corps League. Membership is for children ages 8 through 18 or completion of high school. The Young Marines models the program after Marine Corps' values, honor, courage, and commitment by focusing on teaching youth to live a drug-free lifestyle and teach ideals such as leadership, teamwork, and discipline. Whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyle, no use of illegal drugs, no illegal use of legal drugs. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through 31st, and whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical institutions, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. And whereas the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia community further commits its resources to ensure the success of the Red Ribbon Campaign, now therefore I, William D. Sussmans Jr., Mayor of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia, do hereby proclaim October 23rd through 31st, 2015 Red Ribbon Week in Virginia Beach, and I encourage all citizens to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Week, but all year long, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free city. May I present this to you? Please come forward. Thank you very much. We thank you all for coming down tonight. Honored to have you. We'll now move forward with the consent agenda. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval under the consent agenda. First, under ordinances and resolutions, I-1, which is approval for a deferral for 30 days, which is the ordinances to amend the city code, compliance with the Code of Virginia. A, sections, descriptions, authorizations for EMS and fire medical services, and B, section, biennial license renewal for EMS. Item I-2 for approval, ordinance to add section 35-64.1 to city code for exclusion of reverse mortgage payments and calculation of income for the elderly and disabled, tax relief effective immediately. Item 3, which is a resolution to adopt the 2016 legislative agenda and request Virginia Beach General Assembly delegation sponsor and/or support this legislation. The clerk would please note that I will be abstaining on item 19, that Mr. Moss is voting no on items 4, 6, 12, and 18, and that item 12 has been amended, and that item 20 is not a part of the consent agenda.
Good job.
Your Honor,
He's
I do have a speaker on item 20 when you get to it.
We're going to do that separately. 20 will be pulled separately.
Right, but after the amendment, I said I would vote yes on 12.
Okay, so
After it was amended.
Mr. Moss is voting yes on item 12.
All right,
Correction.
that's what I said.
Item 4, or item I-4, which is a resolution to support applications to Virginia Department of Transportation for A, the fiscal year 2016-2017 revenue sharing program, Rosemont Road Phase 5 and Princess Anne Road Phase 7, and B, fiscal year 2016-2017 transportation alternatives, Salem Road, West Great Neck Road, Providence Road, and Independence Boulevard, Baxter Road sidewalk projects. Clerk will please note that I am abstaining on that item. Item 5, ordinance to amend the.
We're pulling that.
All right, excuse me. Item 7, ordinance to declare 2750 Elbow Road as excess property and authorize dedication to the city of Chesapeake. 8, the resolution to appoint Kathleen A. Keffer as Assistant City Attorney effective October 22nd, 2015. And 10, ordinance to transfer $419,610 to the sheriff for a horizontal compression adjustments for deputies. A, $104,924 from Sheriff's Reserve for contingencies, and B, $314,608 from the current year's general fund compression reserve.
I open a public hearing for planning.
Under planning for consent, item 1, which is the Ship's Cabin Club, Inc., and Redhead Realty Corporation in the Princess Anne District. Item 2, the PI Telecom. Oh, all right, we'll have to pull that. Item 3, LaRae Tucker and Marjorie E. Harris, RT, for conditional use permit, Ray and Auto Service in the Beach District. Item 4, the Walmart Real Estate Business Trust and Hilltop Copeland Associates application in the Beach District. Item 5, the Holloman Brown Funeral Home, Inc., application for conditional change of zoning in the Kempsville District, and the clerk would please note that I am abstaining on that item, and Mr. Wood is also abstaining on that item. Item 6 is the CCW Development Associates and Wayne Dupree for a conditional change of zoning from A12 apartment to conditional A12 in the Beach District. And the clerk would please note that Mayor Sessoms is abstaining on this item. So moved, Mr.
I have a
Mayor.
motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion?
Yes, Mayor, on item number 10 under ordinances and resolution, for the sheriff, horizontal compression adjustments, are you voting no, John?
I've corrected it because I got the answers to my questions.
He changed his vote.
Okay.
I didn't have them earlier, but I
Got a
have.
motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 11-0, you have adopted the ordinances and approved the planning items with the exception of the nay votes and the abstention votes, which will be noted in the minutes.
Thank you. Sheriff Stolley, did you want to make a comment before we moved on?
Mayor, I'm going to do my part in trying to make the miracle happen of a short meeting. I'm going to remove half of your audience. We're here to thank you for your vote on the compression pay. They know you have pressing needs, and these are all off-duty deputies, and they just want to come by and say thank you for your vote on the compression pay.
Well, we thank you for your service and everyone else's service out there. Thank you very
And
much.
before you depart, I strongly encourage you to find a way to come to an agreement on a memorandum of understanding about personnel with the city manager. You're the only one that doesn't have one, and I think that would be good for the city.
All right, well, I will look into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could explain my no votes?
Oh, please, John, go
I
right.
want to explain my no votes. First, the one on Medicare expansion. This council has never received a briefing on Medicare expansion, and I doubt that anyone on this body could really articulate all the facets of Medicare expansion, and I'm not used to voting things I don't understand. But more importantly, that's a responsibility of the General Assembly, and we often talk about the mandates they give us without funding, and now we're telling them how to do their job. I think they're better to do that job, and they don't need our help, so I'm voting no on that. With regards to the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, this is to permit the mayor, when he can't attend, to designate someone else. As you know, under that statute that was adopted, the mayor, as by position, serves on that board, but that board is not subordinate to the council, and as a member, he's not a city council member on that board. He's a member of HR TAC. I think that that person should not be able to designate by themselves who fills it. If we are to change the law, I think they should give that option to the general body from which they come from, and the council as a whole would decide who would represent the city's interest rather than him picking someone by himself. That didn't pass the General Assembly last year. I hope it doesn't pass this year. With regards to the full funding for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, that's always a great idea, but once again, we're asking the General Assembly for money for other things, and I don't think we should be telling the General Assembly where they should or shouldn't take risks. The State Compensation Board communicates with the General Assembly what the requirement would be should they fully fund it, and the state consciously decides, or the General Assembly has decided to do something different. I suggest that the Commonwealth Attorney should engage the members of the same party of our delegation of General Assembly and take his issue there, but I don't believe it's our role to instruct the General Assembly on what risks they should take and what obligations of the Commonwealth we think they should fund. So I voted no.
Thank you very much for your comments there. I'll now go to item number 3 in ordinances and resolutions, number 20 in the legislative agenda. Mr. Moss.
Yes. Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. You may recall from the paper, this deals with the subject of suicide, which by definition is a very emotional, vested item. The legislative proposal on the table addresses the issue that we experienced recently where a spouse and a family member had someone in their family commit suicide. It was not ruled a crime. It was ruled a suicide. That family sought to not only have access, but to actually possess public records, I might add, publicly paid for records, in the possession of the police department so that they could possess them about their family member. So why is this proposal on the table? It's because the police chief under the state statute has the discretion as to whether or not to release that material to family members. His initial reaction was to provide them no access. Upon some public feedback, he conceded to allow them to have access to view the records and read the records, but not to actually possess the records. Of course, that didn't satisfy the family. They pursued litigation. The judge ruled that under, more or less, I'm not a lawyer, but close to this, that the state statute gave that total discretion to the police chief, and therefore the defendants had no recourse to judicial review of that decision. Imagine in America a bureaucrat for whose decisions have no review. It's hard to believe we're talking about the Commonwealth of Virginia. But nonetheless, that's where they're at. They did go and view the records in person. They have since filed an appeal with the state Supreme Court. But there is a larger issue here about, do we really need someone to protect us from ourselves and our own data? So I went back and said, before I got to the police chief's actual letter that the mayor forwarded his concerns on, I said, gosh, let's go back and look and say, what does the Commonwealth of Virginia say about the relationship of individuals to the government that supposedly serves them? It's interesting that Article 1 of our state constitution, unlike the federal constitution, is, it's the Bill of Rights. And when you read that, it looks a lot like the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution, because it was the basis. And it talks a lot about people, the government is to serve them, be subordinate to them, and assure their prosperity and happiness. I can tell you this family is not happy about not having access to records about a family member where no crime took place, which if crime did take place, under discovery, a defense attorney would have access to. It's amazing. And then under Article 2, it talks about the people. And it talks about that all power rests with the people and the magistrates are their trustees. Police chief, we're all magistrates. And at times, we're supposed to be, us, the police chiefs, are supposed to be amenable to the best interest of the public. And then it talks about that we should be able to petition. So a real issue here is the current law denies what every citizen thinks they should have is the right to have a decision by a non-elected person, a magistrate, a trustee, to be reviewed by a judicial authority to assure that it's in the best interest of the public. The current statute denies every citizen in the Commonwealth that right which they should have. I think it's egregious. But now let's go back and look at what is the rationale offered, because there's always two sides to every story. And the mayor, in a letter of 6 October to members of council, he talked about and shared, which I had also seen, the police chief's concerns. And he talked about that these things include personal information, sometimes about the very family members who are asking to position the records. So clearly they're entitled to their own personal information. He acknowledges that other information could be redacted. And so I think, and it actually can, it should be, but his concern was that people, once they had the information, might use it in a way that would harm other people. Now, that's true of almost any data you could get, whether it's private movies or whatever it could be. But you know what? That's what we have civil courts for. I don't think it's the function of a magistrate to tell people, I'm going to protect you against yourself. And because there's data that you should otherwise be entitled to, might be harmful in my judgment, I'm going to deny you the right to have it about your own family member. Information that there was actually a criminal case, the attorney on the other side defending the defendant would have access to under discovery. I mean, this is just not right in America. This is and I do have some members here on Assembly willing to sponsor this. I suspect it won't get a second here, but it is shameful that our oath of office says we're going to do what? Uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia. So when you go back and look at that Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, it tells you we should be erring on the side of the citizen to have information about themselves and their family that's retained by government. This is an egregious act, not in keeping with the country that we say we all want, and this is the very thing that causes distrust. And I would move for its adoption.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion will not move forward.
But I just want the record to know I did not remove it. It just did not receive a second.
Hopefully we did everything you asked us to do.
Yep, that's
Very
how I
good.
say.
Mayor Sessions, we have a speaker on this item.
Oh,
Okay.
I apologize.
Marlene Castellucci.
We welcome you tonight. You'll have 3 minutes.
She's representing the VPTA.
Okay.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Marlena Castelluzzo, Chair of the Virginia Beach Taxpayer Alliance, and I speak on behalf of VPTA regarding Councilman Moss' position to remove the godlike authority of members of our public safety officers to one of constitutional rights of families. Sadly, I speak from firsthand knowledge as my nephew David, my brother's youngest son, committed suicide. Had the Portland police taken the omnipotent stand that we face, the paralyzing agony and heartbreak of David's tragedy would have been intensified into incomprehensible torment. Many families may not seek any information regarding the facts of their loved one's suicide. That should be their right. But for others, as was the case with my family, the specifics were of some minor consolation. It eased some of the anguish of responsibility, diverted attempts to assign blame, and lessened the seemingly never-ending questions that emerge at the initial heart-rending news. Why, if someone's child, parent, sibling, any relative is murdered, the most minute particulars are not only available, but are put forth in grand detail for the media, the press, in court, for any and all to peruse. But the very personal suffering from a suicide is shrouded in a veil of secrecy. This is patently wrong. By what authority do these officers and you, Mayor, have the right to engage in omnipotent decision-making? Families have the right to gain whatever information is available if they so choose, and shame on those who feel that their will is superior to that of surviving family members. We urge you to support Mr. Moss's position and give back to families what is rightfully theirs.
Thank you for coming down tonight. Council, I'm now going to the public hearing part, and we'll do the excess city property at 704 Hampshire Lane, African American Cultural Center. After the public hearing on this piece of property, we will have the vote. We do have speakers. If you could call the speakers, please.
Addie Wright Thomason.
And all speakers will have 3 minutes, please. So nice to have you here tonight.
Thank you. Council, my name is Addie Wright Thomason, and I'm honored to be the president of the board for the African American Cultural Center that we will be building here in Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach is a model city for the world. It is known to take really good care of its natural resources as well as its human resources. One of the important parts of a community is its story, its history, and its culture. Important because it represents the diversity of that community. The African American Cultural Center will close the gap for many of our citizens, not just for the African American citizens, but these histories, these stories, and this culture is of benefit to the total community, particularly our children. This project will benefit all citizens and will move this city closer to its rightful position of a great world city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming down. Next speaker, please.
Becky Livas. And the speaker after that would be James Banks.
We welcome you tonight. Nice to see you.
Your Honor, this is
I know exactly who she is, John Perry's daughter.
Well,
She even used to be
first
on
paragraph.
television.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Famous Becky Livas.
Yeah.
Well, then, you know, because of his strong family history, John Perry had a keen appreciation for the older communities in Virginia Beach and the problems that they face. Growing up in Thomasville, Georgia, he lived firsthand very often what older communities here felt. Although his parents were college graduates, and they ran the only school for colored children in Thomasville, Georgia. As a former high school history and middle school history and geography teacher, I have grave concerns about the self-image issues of African American young people. With the introduction of No Child Left Behind and new technologies, teachers aren't allowed to take those teachable moments and share backstories of history that contribute to the pride that builds the character of youngsters. And of course, the media is no help. Cities and Hampton Roads have a long record of what I call dismissing not only the needs of the black communities, but also the history. I had to erase a lot. Students need a place to see documents that testify to the richness of their local history, to see that blacks in Princess Anne County and Virginia Beach have defined themselves in a positive manner by achievements that overcome racism, classism, and dismissal of basic human services such as the citizens in Burton Station and SeaTac have experienced and endured with dignity. Young African Americans today need a history lesson that reinforces the notion that as humans, we define who we are, not someone else who gives us permission to be. Recently, there has been much written, because it's 50 years from the 60s and all the civil rights activities, and 150 years since emancipation, much has been written about the progress or lack of progress that we've made, with too many blacks struggling in lower economic, educational, poor health, and class issues. As a graduate of Hampton University, I'm often inspired by thinking about the Emancipation Oak. In Alexandria, there is a sculpture that is called Truths That Rise from the Roots Remembered, and it's a bunch of bronze trees. I believe that youngsters in Virginia Beach need a place that gives them pride from truths that rise from roots remembered, housed in the African American Cultural Center.
Thank you very much for coming down. It's nice to see you. Yes, sir.
I just want to acknowledge, because you were too modest, John Perry, for a lot of people who are watching, you probably didn't know, was the first African-American elected to city council and was the oldest person to initially be elected to city council. And he always talked about what trees being prettier than a billboard. Remember that? During that election? Your dad was a real jewel. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jim Banks.
Jim, we welcome you tonight, sir. Yes, sir.
As I was coming down Princess Anne Road tonight, I looked over to the right-hand side and I saw Turning Point Church. And the church was saying a tribute to Robert Walton. Now, many of you may not know that Joseph Walton, who was a funeral home director in Virginia Beach, one of the oldest black businesses in Virginia Beach, just passed away about a week ago. Yeah. And Princess Anne Road there, Holland Road, the land between the two of those was his. And a lot of people don't understand or know about what's going on in this community. And this is why these types of things need to be preserved. African American Cultural Center will help us do that. One of the things that we look at, I'm on the Community Development Corporation Board in Virginia Beach, been there for quite a while, and there were 12 target areas that we worked in. Those have history. We need to know that. Some people may know that Betty F. Williams is buried in Virginia Beach, but they don't know where. We got a school named after, but they don't know where. So these are things that we need to bring to the attention and let the children in this area know. So I welcome your support for the African American Cultural Center.
Thank you for coming down, sir. Next speaker, please.
That's all the speakers on this, Your Honor.
That's all the speakers. Dr. Amelia Ross Hammond, do you have a motion?
I have a motion. I move that the city council members unanimously support the center. But I would like to read something else that's important. I am a volunteer, unpaid member of the African American Culture Center Incorporated. The city attorney has advised me that I do not have a conflict with respect to my vote. But I nevertheless want to publicly disclose that I am the project director for the center. I'm voting on this matter because of its importance to our community.
I second. We got a lot of seconds. A lot of seconds. All right, any discussion? Call for the question, please.
The answer is 11-0.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay.
I would like all of you to please stand. We have members of the E-Board, if you hold your hands up. We have members from Delta, they hold their hands up. We have the Interdenominational Ministers Conference, if they stand, hold their hands up. We have civic leagues, we have NAACP, we have American Association of Civic Leaders Excellence, we have African American Political Action Committee, Will you all stand up together because this is very important. I want to thank the city for taking this historic step so that African Americans born in the city of Virginia Beach and Princess Anne from the mid-1600s will be motivated to action and mobilize to make this dream come true so that they can share the richness and diversity of their culture historically, aesthetically, and politically. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for coming down again.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move to the next item, the public hearing. I believe we didn't have any speakers for 2750 Elbow Road.
No.
Now we'll do the amendment of the fiscal year 2016 capital budget regarding light rail. And John, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it just like I did that. We'll have the public hearing, then we'll vote on the.
There are speakers.
Oh, I know. We're going to take the speakers during the public hearing, which will be for the same, okay?
Fair enough. Sounds all good.
Okay, would you please call the speakers?
On the light rail.
Yes, ma'am. Public hearing number 2.
Dan Blythe. After Dan Blythe for Joe Bellet.
We welcome you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice
All
Mayor.
speakers will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Won't take that long.
You're my hero.
Members of council, my name is Dane Bly. I live in the Bayside District. I encourage you to vote for the budget ordinance proposed by Councilman Moss. A structural deficit mitigation account is a transparent way for all of us to track the various ways the budget gap will be closed. Transferring $10 million of light rail funding is a fiscally prudent start to closing the anticipated $33 million FY 16-17 shortfall. You raise real estate taxes, increase fees, rated money from the Open Space Reserve Fund and Agricultural Reserve Fund for light rail. What more are you willing to sacrifice on the altar of light rail? Instead of spending hundreds of millions of our hard-earned tax dollars on antiquated and outdated light rail, I encourage you to consider forward-thinking technologies like self-driving cars. In fact, in today's newspaper, there was an article up in Northern Virginia that Senator Warner actually wrote in one, and he said, this is the next big, great disruptive technology. Warner said the similarities between automated vehicle technology and the wireless industry 3 decades ago are striking. It's coming. It's the wave of the future. So in conclusion, you can accomplish 2 very important goals here if you pass the ordinance. One, you take a strong step towards dodging or closing the budget gap that's coming up, and you save taxpayers significant financial pain. And I thank you for your
Thanks
consideration.
for coming down. Next speaker,
Joe
please.
Bellet.
We welcome you tonight,
Next
sir.
speaker is Richard Downing.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. I sat down this morning and I read the newspaper, and I was kind of taken aback because I hadn't heard a whole lot about this public hearing or this public meeting that was supposed to happen tonight. It's just another thing that I'm concerned about, is that the word is not getting out to the average taxpayer. I think Councilman Dyer brought the issue up the last time we talked about light rail in this kind of forum. The information's just not getting out to the average citizens. They're not getting information about how the project's progressing right now, where we are with the project. And so I wrote a whole long dissertation of things that I wanted to talk about with you guys, but you know what? I came to the conclusion at the end of all that is that I don't have enough information to make an opinion about what you guys are voting on, or what you folks are voting on tonight. Vice Mayor Jones, you hit it on the head this morning. Let's just stop for a minute. Let's stop the madness. Let's get some information out to the people so they can get here, they can get the information, they can make a sane decision. Right now, I could give you my opinion on it based on the fact that I don't like the light rail project as it stands. And I could say, go ahead, take the money, move it along, move it around. But I think Vice Mayor Jones is right on by saying, let's stop. Let's take a look at everything first before we forge ahead, because just, what, about 4 months ago, this council voted to have that $20 million on the side for light rail. It was a big issue. It was an emotional issue. It was just action-packed the whole time until the end. Now, all of a sudden, you want to move the money back. What else? What's going on here? Why do you want to move the money? You know, what's so important about moving the money now? I understand what Councilman Moss is trying to do here. It's a great thing. He wants to kind of move along and get this budget deficit all straight as fast as we can. However, you know, where are we going to get the money for the light rail if this light rail project is going as it seems it's going down the slippery slope?
Thank you. Well, yes, sir.
Yeah, if it's okay, Council, I'd like to make, some of the remarks I was going to make later, because it really segues in what this gentleman said. It's well known on this panel that I'm not a fan of light rail, but once again, I am a proponent of having the referendum. And one of the reasons, as I explained in the afternoon session, was to really facilitate and promote a public discourse and understanding. I think what you said perfectly right now is that there's just not a lot of information out there. And what I'm afraid, I don't want this major decision to divide the community. I want to build some bridges of positive communication between the proponents and opponents of this in a meaningful way. And one of the reasons that, I really don't support the vote tonight, but I do support the discussion of it. I'm with it in principle, but not process, is that we have yet to have a meaningful discussion on this and all of the other issues related to light rail going forward. And I think the public deserves, as we go forward, and as we are compelled to vote on some of this stuff, that we have that meaningful discussion first. So folks like yourself understand, okay, what are we voting on? And are there other ways? Are there other better ways? Is there a better process? But I think ultimately, right now, a request made that we're going to have some council workshops. The mayor has graciously invited the Secretary of Transportation coming. We may have the folks from HRT coming to explain what's going on. And I'll tell you what, I ended my letter last time. Good government never fears an educated or engaged public, and I want to thank you for coming forward.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I just want you to know, when you have a chance to hear my remarks, you will see how clear and how unambiguous the issue before us is, and all this other stuff in the paper is like subterfuge and a feint. But if the issue is much crisper and cleaner than you would be led to believe.
I agree with that, but all we're getting is the information from the newspaper. That's all we get.
I rest my case.
Richard Dunning and Ken Shore.
We welcome you tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Mr. Dyer, thank you for your speech. We needed that very much. I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor and Council, I come to you as an ordinary citizen. I don't come up here much, but I think I speak for many people, many citizens that feel the same way that I do. We feel like that we're being marginalized, and we see that we have a $33 million shortfall in our budget right now. 20 million of it is specifically designated for light rail. Why? City Manager Spoor has reported that he's instituted a hiring freeze and asked department heads to cut back budgets by up to 10%. Questions for the council. Why even think about cutting back on essential services? Increasing our real estate tax by an average of $45 per household for the average property? Ignore millions of dollars worth of backlog road projects throughout the city and focus on a narrow 3.2-mile corridor? As far as the Secretary of Transportation, even he has said, Aubrey Lane has said that the $300 million light rail project is insane. The state and the city funding, the funding that has meant for light rail is transportation money and should not be used for economic development, and I think that's what we're using it for, really. Why would we ignore HRT and other studies saying light rail will not reduce traffic and may cause bottlenecks in certain areas? According to the Brookings Institution, the Tide loses more money per ride by wide margin more than any other metro line in the United States. The Tide has the fewest among the 31 rail lines ranked in the report. WTKR 4 years said that Tide, 4 years in running, has lost ridership of $1.1 million. Millennials don't drive as much as they used to and use public transportation will probably decline. I support Mr. Moss on his request here for his ordinance, and I also support Mr. Dyers for his referendum for the light rail that we need to have next year. As far as the light rail, asking the voters that they want light rail before knowing the cost of light rail, $100 million per mile, is like asking a child if they want a cookie. We still don't have a good handle on costs from HRT, and that is why the State Transportation Secretary, Aubrey Lane, has appointed third-party oversight. HRT statistics show ridership is declining, and every rider will be subsidized by approximately $6.63, not to mention the real estate tax going up for the average homeowner of $45 per year. I thank you for your time here and appreciate it.
Thank you for coming down. Next speaker, please.
Ken Chart and Marlene Castelluccio.
You want to reset the clock, please? Thank you. We welcome you, sir.
As you guys know, I'm not any fan of yours, but your peasants have spoke. You're true peasants. Your report told you, no, don't do it. Then a study came out, which the gentleman just disclosed, that is the biggest boondoggle. And you guys are still considering on, hey, let's keep it over here for light rail. I'm totally for reducing the budget, because apparently you guys don't live within your budget. You like to live in the red. You know? Gerald Celente said it best. Politics is show business for ugly people. You laugh, but it is. Because everybody gets hooked up. How do I know? Well, Sessoms was board of directors. Guess what? Now he's not. Guess who he teamed up with in the past cycle for senators? Warner. Guess who he's tied to? The big banks. Bankers hang out with bankers. Don't believe me that he's not the only one? Ms. Kane, you're on the board of directors with the Sandler Center.
No, I'm not. I have nothing to do with the family.
You had your name listed on the board of directors.
You want to get to the point of what you're making, please.
Board of directors of the Sandler Center.
My point is this.
Just make your point, please.
We peasants don't want our money wasted. You're not kings and queens. You're employees of the people.
Thank you for coming down. Next speaker, please.
Marlene Castelluccio and Martha McLeese.
You're right. We welcome you back.
What's his name?
Mayor, members of council, my name again is Marlene Castelluccio, chairperson of Virginia Beach Taxpayer Alliance. And quite frankly, I wish we could stop meeting like this. For the entire existence of VBTA, our leadership has been coming before the city council to challenge, direct, recommend, encourage, and even plead for this body to act ethically and sensibly regarding the city's budgets and the citizens' needs versus special interest groups' influences. I've joined far more illustrious previous VBTA leadership than myself, example, Councilman Moss, and presented meticulously researched empirical data to support budget reform. Only Councilman Dyer, Councilman Moss, and previously Councilman DeSteff have ever responded in a dutiful manner with Virginia Beach citizens' needs first and the allure of special interests rebuffed. However, this time you have before you a win-win. City Manager Spoor has presented to Council a future $30 million shortfall, which in actuality is not a shortfall. It simply represents spending exceeding revenue. And in businesses or a home budget, that would mean poor to fiscally reckless financial planning. But that's another topic for another day. The state is willing to absorb the cost of the potential car purchases. Thus, the $10 million in proposed borrowing debt is negated, and the $10 million in cash reserved to ante up for that $20 million train car purchase is now unconstrained. Sensible fiduciary action is to support Councilman Moss's ordinance to set the $10 million in cash aside into account to offset this $30 million so-called shortfall. As future monies become available, as they always seem to, add to that account. Thus, by the time the reality of the supposed shortfall is upon the city, there will be no shortfall, real or invented. Virginia Beach Taxpayer Alliance once again urges you to take a sound, fiscally conscientious action, be accountable to your constituency, and unanimously approve Councilman Moss's proposal for the now unencumbered $10 million cash reserve.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Martha McLeese and Diana Howard.
We welcome you tonight, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm Martha McLeese, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Virginia Beach Vision Board of Directors. In May, this council voted to include financing mechanisms in the budget to accompany adoption of the light rail extension to Town Center as the locally preferred alternative, and to allow a light rail evaluation process to move forward. The proposed ordinance before you tonight will reverse your previous actions of just 5 months ago. I would advise that nothing has changed to warrant a reversal of those actions. While the ordinance suggests its intent is to mitigate a projected budget shortfall in the next fiscal year, the practical result will be to eliminate council's ability to further consider bringing the light rail system into Virginia Beach. Such action will leave us with a grossly incomplete project analysis and the assurance of increased costs. On one hand, the opponents of light rail extension indicate that they want a public referendum on the issue in November of next year so that an informed public can vote. Yet, passage of this ordinance would ensure that neither the public nor council will have reliable cost projections nor design analysis on which to base their decisions. The public's interests cannot be served by redirecting the funds essential for completing the cost analysis and design process that are required to put the light rail extension project out for bid. Not until then will we know the true cost, feasibility, and advisability of the next phase of what will ultimately become a regional multimodal transit system. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Diana Howard, Carolyn Dichter.
We're glad to have you tonight.
Hi, how you doing today? I'm Diana Howard. I'm the Vice Chair of the Virginia Beach Tea Party. So here we have a $33 million budget shortfall, and I'm glad that you're all bringing that to our attention now so we can address it before next year. So cutting spending, something you should do every year. Look at, doing efficiencies. I'm sure we have a lot of things that, we can do. And I know the city does that every year, looks at it, efficiencies and tries to cut spending, right? Also, freezing hiring, probably a good idea too. You have a lot of employees that maybe positions that go unfilled from 6 to a year, probably don't need them. But one of the things you can do is you can get rid of that $20 million for light rail, because I don't see why the cars that are already for light rail in Norfolk can't go an extra 3 miles. Why we need new ones. So it's not a necessity. We don't need the new cars. It's been said that because it's dedicated funds that we can't use it, but you dedicated the funds so you can undesignate the funds. And while you're undesignating the funds, why don't you undesignate some of the funds to the tourist investment program and the economic development? We can get some more out of that too. There's transportation is a big thing. We've had a lot of bills on transportation recently, and the state doesn't have the money to be wasting on frivolous projects like light rail. There's so many projects that are going to be competing that there is not enough money to pay for all the projects that are going to be competing. The federal government's not giving us money. We got $2 billion worth of transportation projects, road projects that are not funded. So why spend money that we don't need when we can just approve Councilman Morse's ordinance, and then we'll have that much less money that we have to worry about finding efficiencies and freezing hiring. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for coming down. Next speaker, please.
Carolyn Dietrich and Karen Forget.
We welcome you tonight, ma'am.
Mayor, council, and people. It is difficult for me to understand why our mayor and several city council members can negate all the wise word of educated scholars, high office holders and statisticians who show that light rail is not a profitable or wise idea for the people in the city of Virginia Beach. It is unfathomable for the elected officials to think they can squander our tax monies, skirting our knowledge, and utilizing somewhat hidden agendas. Our residents that don't have jobs because of local lack of bus transportation are not even being thought of at this time, when smart buses could help stimulate this economy in families needing transportation in order to work. Light rail cars are not a Christmas set of trains. You almost made a $17 million mistake when you decided to purchase 4 light rail cars. This was not a deal. Light rail is not a necessity. What a catastrophic loss it would have been for taxpayers. You have misinterpreted the previous referendum. It was a simple vote by the people of Virginia Beach for a study to be made on costs. It was not a mandate. It should be very helpful to put this on the upcoming ballot, most simply, yes for light rail, no for light rail. This should be put on separate lines so there are no voting mistakes. While working in New York City on my first job with the editor of American Explorer Publications, a Harvard Business School grad, I was molested on the subway. It frightened me every day thereafter when I left the office to return to my home in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. I wanted to alert you now that we have a serious problem in Virginia Beach. After parking on the 3rd or 4th floor of your Sandler Town Center building to go to the Virginia Beach Forum, while waiting for the elevator, I was shocked to feel 2 hands, one on each shoulder, coming from somebody behind me. Thank God the elevator doors opened and I pulled away and ran to the elevator, into the elevator. The guilty person ran down the staircase. Where were our police, Mr. Mayor? Can we afford a policeman there? Rather than light rail, we desperately need another tunnel, which will relieve congestion for people coming from the north for a beach weekend before they decide not to come here because of endless tie-ups in traffic.
Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate you coming down. Your time has expired. Next speaker, please.
Aaron Forget and William Bischoff.
We welcome you tonight.
Good evening, Mayor Sessoms and City Council members. I'm Karen Forget, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors of Lynn Haven River Now. And I'm here to urge you to vote against the adoption of the proposed budget ordinance. The City Council and City staff have previously laid out a sound and responsible process that will enable us to, 1, stay on a reasonable schedule in gathering important information related to light rail, 2, minimize any tax increases, 3, take full advantage of state funds, and 4, prepare the city to be able to ascertain the real cost of extending the tide to town center. We need this real cost information to make responsible decisions. I urge you to stay on the path that you've already laid out. It's a sound and reasonable one, and to not adopt this budget ordinance tonight.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Your Honor, believe it or not, that's all the speakers on this one.
That's all the speakers. Very good. Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before the reason why I didn't ask many people to come down here, in fact, didn't ask anyone, because the paper really has done a disservice. I mean, obviously, they never read my ordinance. Before I get to my prepared remarks, I want to just touch on a few things that were mentioned. First, the ordinance does not reverse the decision made. You may recall, last May, the city manager came to us when the Secretary of Transportation was going to be using federal rail money that he could not release until there was a record of decision issued by the Federal Transit Agency, which could not be issued until the whole EIS process had been completed, which wouldn't be until about 2017. So we, the city, agreed to forward fund the purchasing of the trains with an agreement for the state that they would reimburse us at the time the record of decision was made. Further, the state went on to say, should we decide not to pursue with light rail, they would still hold us harmless and would still reimburse us for the trains, and they would go to the Norfolk system. We, part of the money that we went in, and not me, but the council majority, raised taxes 1.8 cents on real estate, $5 on your car, you may recall. We moved 2.7 from open space and another 1 point something million dollars from the agricultural reserve to get this combination of money. Now, remember now, the requirement was rail cars. The city, meaning you, were forward funding. The state steps in this summer and says, you know, we really don't want to go through that whole EIS process. Judge yourself why that is. But we found other money, so we no longer need a record of decision to finance the cars, and we will pay them up front. This ordinance doesn't change the requirement for rail cars. It doesn't reverse any of the taxes, any of the fees, any of the realignment of funds that were made for outgoing budgets when the final decision is made. Doesn't do any of that. It just takes, in the year of execution, the year that we're in, the $10 million in cash, because other money was being borrowed, that was set aside to meet a requirement for cars that we no longer have to meet. So, in the simplest terms, it's like saying you had money put aside to buy a car, all of a sudden you inherited money to buy the car, and you put the money back in your savings account. This is nothing, I'm not asking anything about changing the process. And further, for those who read the ordinance, it says this ordinance will eliminate the current fiscal year appropriation with the exception, this is important, the exception of encumbrances for engineering design services. So Lynn Haven now, be sure that we're going to be doing all that cost analysis to the light rail extension project to include even the money for the bike pathways. So we're not taking any money that's going towards the study. This isn't impeding our timeline to accomplish our work. This isn't reducing or eliminating taxes in the out years. None of that is true. Now, obviously, people who read the ordinance would know that what it does versus what it's purported to do. I would love to have another debate about light rail, but I respect my members' time. And the time to have that debate is November the 8th of 2016 when we have council elections, but I'm not revisiting now. I'm just making sure that the taxpayer's budget accurately reflects the current year requirements and the current year need for money and appropriately realigns funds not necessary for the purpose for which it was originally appropriated to go into a piggy bank where people can see it. And I would hope we'd be filling it up with savings from throughout the budget, throughout the year, filling that up to be $33 million. So let's be clear. We're not redebating light rail. We're not reversing any decisions. We're not eliminating any requirements. We are just realigning funding for a requirement that's now being met by the state. So with that, I would like to go to my prepared remarks,
Please.
Mr. Mayor, because I'm sorry that the public, that the press or the newspaper would lead you to believe I was talking about 20 million. It's always been 10, and if you read it, it's clearly in the ordinance that it says 10. Fellow residents and my colleagues, my proposal is not a redebate of last May's decision to raise the real estate tax, increase the auto decal, and partially realign open space reserve revenues and agricultural reserve funds to light rail, for which supposedly no final decision has been made. I would enjoy dissecting the errors of that decision by my peers, say Councilman Dyer, but unless my peers choose that course, I will reserve that discussion for the upcoming elections. My proposal tonight is about truth and accuracy in budgeting. My proposal is agnostic on whether the current or future composition of City Council sustains or reverses the current bias to extend light rail to Virginia Beach. I'm confident and proud to admit that the application of reason has brought the same conclusion has been come to by the City Treasurer, John Atkinson, State Senator Frank Wagner, who actually sponsored the initial legislation with Bob Tata that caused the studies for light rail to start, He has finally seen the data and the reason that it doesn't make sense. Delegates Barry Knight, Delegate Bill DeSteff, Delegate Scott Taylor, and Delegate Chris Stolley, all these state elected officials have been out telling their residents that light rail doesn't make sense for Virginia Beach and we can't afford it, and they're right. My opposition to light rail has no bearing on my specific proposal tonight, however. Plain and simple, my proposal just updates the city's budget to reflect that the state, not the city, will now fund the first dollar for the purchase of the light rail cars, a purchase by the state that places no financial obligation on the city, as I discussed. Some will claim that the same result could be achieved if we did nothing, because the money would go supposedly unspent and would add to the surplus at the end of the year. That's the city manager's definition of a surplus. This camp would prefer that the city's budget not be updated to reflect reality, and we would do that at the end of the budget process next year. This camp, for whatever reason, objects to establishing a formal and visible structural deficit mitigation account where the under-execution and the accuracy corrections and the revenues it generated may be deposited in an account we can all see, much like those federal campaign or CFE funds. You know, have a little thermometer and you can see as you fill at the top. What a great way to see what progress the city manager is making with his leadership to make that deficit go away. I do want to thank each of you who came out this evening to support our common goal of shifting the cost curve of the government to the left and making sure we do not need to impose tax and fee increases in already struggling households and small businesses. I know not whether a peer will second my motion. Each member, like me, is elected by you and is only accountable to you. I do not trade votes to advance what reason by itself dictates to be of the highest merit. I measure success in fulfilling my duty independent of the electoral consequences. The fact that my peers may not embrace my proposal does not subtract from their honorable service. It does reflect a substantive difference in our respective definition of what constitutes fiscally responsible government. Only you, the voters, possess the right and the duty to judge the respective performance of your council members. I have faith in the collective judgment of the people over time. Every day I thank God and you, the voters, for the honor and the privilege of serving the public interest. Mr. Mayor, should the motion I'm about to make fail, I want the record to reflect that I did not withdraw it from the table, but it failed to receive a second. With that, I move the adoption of item 1.5, the adoption of the ordinance to realign $10 million and establish the mitigation structural account. Again, thanks to all my bosses that came out this evening on this issue and the indulgence of the time of my peers on this council for this issue. Thank you.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Hearing none, the motion fails. And I would just like to say that I hope that you saw the respect that this council gave you on that. I do want to make two comments. I truly believe what you were recommending should be brought forward during the budget process, and that's coming forth next March. And I do want to be clear in your comments you made, there is no final decision on light rail at this time. I believe that the city council is doing exactly what the referendum said. Go out, be reasonable, get some evaluations, as you just said. We don't know what the cost of light rail is today. No one at this table does. We need this information, as Bobby has suggested, to be more clear. And the regrettable thing, we really won't have those numbers, not this November, and not even the following November, regrettably. But we have so much more information to get, and I believe this council is doing everything reasonable and acknowledging there is no final decision. And I hope you'd agree with me on that.
Technically, I would say that's correct. I think when you look at the body of the language, you'd come to a different
I'll take
conclusion.
a technical correct. Thank you.
But no
Okay.
good intelligent officer would agree.
All right, council, we'll now move on. Okay. Item number 9, ordinance to authorize temporary encroachment into the city's right-of-way to install landscaping, irrigation columns, gates, and fencing at 1700 River Court on behalf of George P. Jr. and Joyce P. Lyon. If you would call the person representing council, the applicant will have 10 minutes. Other speakers will have 3. Also, I think y'all know I'm supposed to have been in Richmond this afternoon. I've got to go to Richmond now. I'm going to be a little bit late. I'm turning the meeting over to Mr. Jones, but I want to make it clear that I would support this, what is this, ordinance. In encroachment, excuse me. I was asked by some people that I respect greatly who came to my office today, and they wanted to make sure that if we had information from the fire department and from the school system that a fire truck could get there and a school bus could get there, and Mr. Wood will provide that information later, but I wanted to make sure that I did do my homework as I was asked. Mr. Jones, I'll turn it over to you.
Have a safe trip.
May the tunnel be
Don is
kind to you.
representing the applicant.
Mr. Badon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. For the record, my name is Eddie Burdon, and it is certainly my privilege to come before the council this evening representing George and Joy Lyon, who built and reside in the beautiful home at the end of at 1700 River Court. I provided each of you with a package of a lot of documents, and I'm going to take a second to go through what I put in front of you all, and I also provided the clerk a copy as well. The first is a petition of the community that the Lions live in, that they be approved and allowed to retain the 2 stone entry columns, a portion of their 4-foot-high wrought iron style fence, a portion of their paver block driveway, and landscaping that are located within a perpetually unimproved and unmaintained city right-of-way at the terminus of River Court in front of their home. There are 95 plus or minus signatures on this petition. They could have obtained more, but I assured them that the petition clearly shows the sentiment of their community and of their neighbors in favor of what's up before the council. I've also included a copy of the June 20, 2007 city staff report from Ms. Lasley on a BZA variance that I'll come back to, a copy of the CBPA, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board plan that was modified and approved to reduce the amount of impervious surface of their home in 2009. The green is the area that was reduced from their plan. A copy of their building permit from February of 2010, and a copy of the city's records of the final inspection, which I've highlighted. Final inspection was passed in August of 2012. Beyond that are 4 pictures that were taken the first week of May 2012 when the home was under construction, showing the home and showing the columns and just showing the state of the property at that point in time. And the last in the package is a picture of the home today with some of the landscaping removed and the turnaround created. I've also provided you all with a 7-page landscape buffer restoration plan prepared by Siska and Iran in 2009. That was a requirement of the CBPA approval and a requirement of their building permit. It includes almost 2/3 of an acre of buffer restoration entirely within the 50-foot seaward buffer, which is entirely restored, and close to an acre overall of buffer restoration on the site. And that plan depicts the columns and a lot of landscaping within the unimproved portion of River Court in front of their property. I want to stress 3 points. First, River Court is a 30-foot wide country road, and I use that description in the most kind sense. It's a wonderful street. I think country roads are fantastic. It is not a typical subdivision for a higher density community that we would see today in Virginia Beach. It has a bulb platted at the terminus point, but it is platted far, far too small and inferior to allow vehicles to circle. It was platted in 1951, and like other streets in this large 1 acre plus low density community like this and other streets, the improved public road stops well short of the platted and unimproved bulb. In 1990, the Virginia Beach City Council adopted the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Ordinance, whose goal was to preserve and restore the resource protection area, and most particularly the 50-foot seaward portion of the resource protection area adjacent to tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay, to protect and enhance the water quality of our Lynnhaven River and all the other tributaries of the bay located within the city of Virginia Beach. But that ordinance also protects the vested rights of property owners on pre-existing lots like the Lions property. They bought this property to redevelop, and they took many, many months with their engineers and architects, working with city staff, and designed a home that is entirely outside of the 50-foot seaward portion of the buffer, and they agreed to restore the entirety of it. At that time, your CBPA staff, this was 2007 through 2009, they indicated that the city saw no need to pave the bulb with over 1,000 square feet of useless asphalt that was insufficient for vehicles to turn around in. And the Board of Zoning Appeals, when we went to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a front yard setback variance to a 32-foot front yard setback, Ms. Lasley, and I highlighted a lot of what's in her report, but I'm going to just talk about the staff comments. She described the variance as for all development that will occur in the landward portion of the environmentally sensitive buffer, and the variance is needed to move the home forward away from the bay so nothing occurs in the 50-foot seaward portion. Staff notes that the existing pavement of River Court cul-de-sac does not match the platted right-of-way, and that the home will actually have a 75-foot setback from the actual pavement of River Court. Back to the landscape plan that I provided. The restoration plan was reviewed and approved before any site plan approval or building permits were issued. Shows the landscaping and shows the columns. I can't see that the fence is shown. But that is all located within, or those improvements are located within the unimproved right-of-way. Now, I also hope that each of you received the letter that Mrs. Lyons addressed to each of you, and it addresses the fact, among other things, that she and her husband, upon becoming aware and being advised of the need to create a 3-point turn for the small school bus, which provides door-to-door service for the Woodards, the new neighbor built next to them, for their autistic daughter. The Lyons worked cooperatively with your staff and removed much of their landscaping and fencing to facilitate the turnaround maneuver required for the bus that has been created. Also, my clients did not at any point object to or oppose the Woodards CBPA variance application for their new home, nor did they object to the Woodards setback variance for their new home adjacent to River Court. During construction of the Woodards home, my clients permitted Mr. Don Bort and his subcontractors. Mr. Bort's an excellent contractor who built their home to use their water, to use their electricity during the early phases of construction. And had Mr. and Mrs. Lyon been aware of the need to seek approval for this encroachment, they certainly would have done so back in 2009 or 2010. Your professional staff has thoroughly reviewed this request and has recommended its approval, subject to the terms and conditions of the encroachment agreement that has been capably prepared by your city attorney and has been executed by my clients. We want to thank Mr. Hanson and all the staff members who've worked on this application. Now, you all certainly all are aware and understand that this situation and appreciate this situation is not at all unique. Streets without currently engineered and improved cul-de-sacs and unimproved paper streets exist in many similar older neighborhoods throughout Virginia Beach, as do encroachments into unimproved areas of platted and unimproved residential streets throughout the city. Some of those neighborhoods, the North End, Bay Colony, Linkhorn, Bird Neck Point, Lindlear, Allenton, Croatan, Little Neck, Thalia, Bay Island, Cape Story, Ocean Park, Chesapeake Beach, Thorogood, Witchduck Point, Great Neck Point, Shore Haven, Godfrey Lane, and many others. Folks, I have stacks of similar files to this of encroachments that have been approved by city councils in Virginia Beach in similar situations to this over the last couple of decades. And there are countless similar encroachments to these and some much larger that exist and have been approved. Landscaping, columns, fences, walls, irrigation systems, sheds, boat docks, stairs, and yes, even a couple of houses. And folks, every one of us has a driveway, most every one of us has a driveway and a mailbox that encroaches in an unimproved city right-of-way. It's not unusual at all. We respectfully request your approval of the recommended encroachment per the agreement, and I would appreciate the opportunity to respond to the opposition if council believes it's necessary.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Richard Swartz and Gayla Swartz.
evening. My name is Gabby Schwartz.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nearly 9 years ago, my husband and I bought our property on River Court. We had seen the property, once owned by friends of ours, several years before that. It was then that we came to the conclusion that one day we would love to be able to live on River Court. It had and has everything we were looking for. Small street, lots of trees, a lot of character, but last but not least, a dead end. This was and still is the perfect place for us to raise our family. We were saddened to see changes being made to the street 3 doors down, but understood that it was in order to provide a service for a young child in our neighborhood. George and Joy Lyon at 1700 River Court never hesitated to compromise by having fencing, landscaping, and driveway taken up in order for a school bus to be able to accommodate the new neighbors and their daughter. In fact, I believe that they went above and beyond where perhaps somebody else would have fought to have kept the land on their property. The Lyonses were given the seal of approval and final CO by the City of Virginia Beach after construction. This is and was the right of the city to do so. The encroachment was beautified and never posed any type of safety issue as far as I'm concerned. I know that safety has been the main concern by the new neighbors at 1708 River Court. Let me just state that there are several families in the neighborhood with young children, including us, and there has never been mention for concern of safety. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Being a dead-end street prevents unnecessary traffic from coming down, and we know that the vehicles which do come down, for example, the mailman, the UPS truck, the city workers, the trash trucks, have a reason for doing so. Allowing a cul-de-sac will only cause more people to come to the end of our street, which would then perhaps be a cause for concern. The Fire and Rescue Department have already made it known that there is no concern for them being able to respond to any emergencies having the fire truck come down and back out. In fact, there are 3 doctors within a span of 3 homes who live on our street. There is no safety hazard at the end of River Court. There never has been. Again, I believe that the Lyonses have done their due diligence in moving landscaping and without question, wholeheartedly gave way for a space for a bus to turn around in order for the neighbor's child to receive the safest accommodation for her. I respectfully ask that the idea of any cul-de-sac on our street be once and for all put to rest. It's time for our neighborhood to be able to get back to living the lives in the safe, quiet, and humble community where we have all chosen to have our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Richard Hildreth. Richard Hildreth and Dana Parker. Are you Mr. Schwartz?
Vice Mayor, council member, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak. I had a prepared statement that 4 of the neighbors and I came up with. I'm not going to read the whole thing because what the last young lady said echoed most of it. I feel that the opportunity to speak is great. I think you need to know and talk with Councilman Wood the amount of really caustic type behaviors going on here and how it's affected everybody that lives on our street. I'm just going to end with that I'm appealing to City Council to appeal this, to accept this encroachment, because what's gone on over the last 9 to 12 months has to stop, and it really has to stop tonight. It has to give our neighborhood a chance to return to civility. The Lyons have made more than their fair share of accommodations to help their neighbors, most of which none of the rest of us would have done. They need to be commended. They never intentionally broke any laws or tried to take excess property. They've made all these accommodations at their own expense to keep the peace, yet the neighbor has continued to the point of absurdity. You'll hear cries of discrimination, cries of racism. They don't exist. They do not exist. The cul-de-sac or road widening or whatever we are referring to it as is unwanted and unnecessary. There is no safety hazard on our street. Please stop this process before it escalates to something really awful happening. Nobody here wants to be on CNN. That's the point we've gotten to at the end of our street. Please let the neighbors in the Woodards enjoy their lives and integrate them into the neighborhood so they can enjoy the peace and serenity that we all bought into when we moved here. If there was a crime committed, it was the crime of the new neighbors not embracing the neighborhood and what it stands for and the peace that we have and how we take care of each other and each other's kids, and not integrating themselves in when they first moved in, because they would have found it as nice as we did. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Richard Hildreth.
Welcome, sir.
Mr. Vice Mayor, City Council members, my name is Rich Hildreth. I'm here to support the Lions as well. My wife and I moved into our home in Forest Hills in 1993. We happened to get to know Mrs. Newberry, the previous owner of 1700 River Court. She told us she built her house in 1941. At the time, that had to be a dirt road. Okay, I'm assuming in 1951, perhaps, the county came down and paved the road, and some county construction supervisor decided where the road would stop, but everybody assumed that the property beyond that, which was a dirt driveway, was the property there. So when the Lions built their house, they built to where the road was. They built a beautiful property, very well appointed, tasteful, and anything, there was no reason to think that their property didn't really go to the road. So a decision by a county supervisor in 1951, perhaps, to rule on that makes really no sense to me. Secondly, there has been discussion regarding whether or not a medical emergency vehicle can get down the road. The previous owner of 1708 River Court was a man named Hanson. He donated the house to the fire department for a controlled burn so that they can practice that sort of thing. He gets a property tax credit. They burned the house. There was a ladder truck, a pump truck, another 10-wheel truck, and two supervisory vehicles that made it down that road and made it back away from the road with no issues that I'm aware of. Finally, in honor of the invocation, if the following people who agree with me from wherever would please stand up so that we don't need to, or you don't need to listen to any more of this stuff. All of those folks support what I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Dana Parker, you don't want to speak? Dr. Rosenbaum? Dr. Rosenbaum? Joanne Milan? William Bischoff?
Vice Mayor,
Welcome, sir.
good to see you. Council members. I'm Bill Bischoff. I am a resident of the city of Virginia Beach and an attorney, and I represent the much maligned next-door neighbors. This council has had to make a lot of very tough decisions over the years, and you've had to make some tonight. But this is really not one of them. Because here are your choices on this application, which is, by the way, an after-the-fact request for permission of encroachments that have already been installed. Not people who have come in to say, we would like to do this in the future. This is folks that took advantage of a situation years ago, installed these encroachments, and then got caught on it, and now are asking for permission. Here are your choices, it seems to me. You can reward these folks who tried to get away with a violation of the law, which is pretty plain. It's 2,500 square feet. If you look at the site plan, the survey, and the package, 2/3 of it is covered, the right-of-way. The city right-of-way, the taxpayers' property is covered with these improvements. They obviously knew what they were doing when they installed these. You could also approve these people getting special treatment by the city staff. And there's really no question about that. The deputy city manager has been to the Lions home several times to come up with this elaborate plan that gives the applicants exactly what they already have at no cost to them and no compensation to the city. The comments that the staff has made, the deputy city manager, where he talks about that the Lions encroachment application represents a compromise. A compromise contemplates that the applicant is in a position to bargain. That is not what they were here. This is city property. They go on to say that the Lions have been extremely cooperative and worked diligently to remove obstructions. Well, that's awful nice, but those obstructions and improvements were in the city right away. This has been special treatment, which the average taxpayer does not get, I would submit to you. And we've talked about tonight the list of areas where these encroachments have occurred, but I would bet that the city staff does not go to the homes of the folks in Green Run, Burton Station, or SeaTac and cut such deals. Now, we can also allow those who are politically connected to pretend that these encroachments are temporary, which is what we've seen in the documents here, just like they've been temporary for the last 5 to 6 years that they've actually been there. Now, you can do those things, that's one choice, or you can be fair. And you can do what the city required my client to do when Ms. Lasley's office found that there was an encroachment of their fence a few inches into the public right-of-way. They sent a letter, they demanded that it be removed, and my client did so within a matter of days. That's what would be fair. The same treatment that my clients got would be that these applicants should get. So you can be even-handed with all of the citizens and not give special perks to those who may be wealthy, powerful, or politically connected. I think those are the choices that you have before you. And I think that you know that these applicants have gotten special treatment here. And that's not right. I think you know that they have violated the law and should not be rewarded for doing so. And knowing these things and knowing your commitment to be fair to all of the citizens of this city, we trust that you will deny this request. Thank you very much.
A question.
Mr. Bishop?
Well, first of all, I've never been accused of being overly aligned with the rich and the powerful, so let me take a different a line of thinking here.
Present company excluded.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think other people here likewise deserve that recognition personally. But what I'd like to ask you is if you were just, forget who your client is, but think you're just, as an applicant, you come, because I went and did some research. I spent a lot of time on this issue, probably more than even on some issues that I talked about tonight myself, in trying to find out how we got here. Now, it's true when they went to the Chesapeake Bay Board and the other kind of boards they had to go to, and they had their plans reviewed and approved, the things you call the encroachment were not on those documents. But when they submitted their landscaping plan, good, bad, or indifferent, but in good faith, all those things were on those documents that were approved. Are you contesting that that's true, or would you agree that that's a common fact?
I don't know that.
Okay, I'll ask the staff later, but let's just, for the sake of a discussion, a dialogue, that is true. So now, maybe the city staff shouldn't have approved it because they didn't have the approachment. You know, they had something, but the city says, yep, your landscaping plan's approved. They've acted in good faith. The citizens aren't supposed to know, aren't supposed to know what the rules are. They follow in good faith, they submit their stuff. They probably had to pay an engineer or a landscape architect to do the plans. That's not cheap. So they submit them to the city, and so the city says yes, right? So they do it, they get their house finished, the city inspects it, they're out there looking at the property, and they give them an occupancy permit, right? They give them, so they can occupy the house. And when the occupancy guy goes there, he sees the fence, because I've been down that road both times before now. He sees the fence, he sees the landscaping. Those people have acted in good faith. They're not the people who are supposed to know the rules, we are. But we gave them an occupancy permit. We gave them the approval for the plans. So if anyone is the people who've made an error in judgment and got them in the wrong spot, it's us, the city.
Mr. Moss, do you really believe that their landscape architect who had the survey in front of him didn't know that he was putting it into the public right of way? Do you really believe that?
The question of what...
And so I don't accept your premise that they acted in good faith.
Well, I like to think everyone acts in good faith, I guess.
And just because the city staff may have missed that particular point, and because they got one through the system when they shouldn't have gotten it, doesn't make it right.
Doesn't make it right, but doesn't mean we should characterize the people as if somehow they purposely used deceit to get something approved. I think you really
Well,
didn't do your
you know,
client justice, but that's all my
they-
question.
They also built on my client's property, too.
I got it. I'll have other questions
Now,
later.
that's been removed, so that's not an issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we've had enough of that.
Wait, wait.
Who's, Ms. Kane?
Sir, Mr. Bischoff?
Mrs. Kane has a question.
I just have to defend our staff and say I don't appreciate the accusatory remarks in the sense that I've had planning, I've had legal, I've had the deputy city managers, I've had staff from top down come to many homes in the Rose Hall, Green Rhine, Windsor neighborhoods, sitting in living rooms, kitchens, backyard pools, around the pool, talking about whatever, because we've been asked to come out. So it's not just this neighborhood that they go knock on doors and oblige and listen to the citizens. It happens everywhere throughout the city. So I take offense to that comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Next speaker.
Dick Willard, Brian Willard, I'm sorry. Brian Willard. Are you representing? Are you representing? Did you get 10 minutes?
Well,
Good evening, esteemed city council members, city manager, city staff, and everyone in attendance tonight. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak about the troubling issues on River Court here in Virginia Beach, to include this encroachment application at 1700 River Court, as well as the public safety issues that already exist on our street. I'm simply here on behalf of my family, and as a father and as a husband, I just want to protect my family to the fullest extent I can, especially from the dangerous roads that exist on River Court. Just as the laws are meant to protect all citizens, our city government was put in place to enforce these laws. City Code Chapter 33, Article 6, Section 33-113, which the City Council just amended on October 6th of this month, states that encroachments into, over, under, or upon any public street, road, alley, or public right-of-way or public property shall be unlawful unless expressly authorized by the City Council. When the Lions built the encroachments at 1700 River Court, this was not a small mistake, or even a mistake at all. You see it from the exhibit. It's 2,500 square feet. This is a public exhibit, public record. 2,500 square feet of encroachments. It was not a small mistake. It wasn't a mistake at all. It was built several years ago, as it was already stated earlier, without a permit. And this was also done in violation of the approved site plan for the property. These encroachments include, but are not limited to, 5 large stone columns, 2 sets of 15-foot gates, underground electrical systems, sprinkler systems, pavers, and landscaping, to the tune, again, of over 2,500 square feet of encroachments, all on public property. Furthermore, City Code 33-2 states that except as otherwise specifically provided, a violation of any provision within these articles shall constitute as a Class 3 misdemeanor. That's the law. So as you think about that fact, here's a story that my attorney just mentioned to show the disparity of treatment between property owners regarding encroachment issues on River Court. About a month ago, my contractor made a small mistake and placed a short 10-foot section of fencing in the city right-of-way. I immediately received a letter from the zoning department stating that I have 30 days to move the fence. So being a law-abiding citizen, I did so within 2 days. But the point is that there was no encroachment application or compromises suggested in that letter. The deputy city manager, Dave Hansen, didn't come to my house and spend an hour and a half in my living room discussing ways that I could resolve the issues, like he did with the Lions. So the real question is, why is there special treatment for the Lions at 1700 River Court with regards to their encroachments? Here's another fact. About a month ago, a master police officer that has been serving the city for over 21 years wrote in a call report regarding my street, and I quote, "Speaking from a public safety concern, a fire engine and an ambulance would not be able to turn around due to no cul-de-sac space. It looks like the residents of 1700 River Court has encroached on the public street." The master police officer, 21 years serving this community, was bold and brave enough to speak exactly what his professional opinion was.
Sir, your time's over already, so thank you.
Okay.
Commander Henry Pierce.
I have some questions, but not of him or the staff.
Commander Pierce?
That's me.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Sessoms. He stepped up for a second. City council members and fellow Virginia Beach residents. I'm Commander Henry P. Pierce IV, United States Navy, and I've been a resident of Virginia Beach for 9 years and native Hampton Roads for 28. I recently assumed command for the Center of Surface Combat Systems, again, while maintaining my family residence here in Virginia Beach. I'm here tonight in direct opposition to the encroachment application that was submitted for 1700 River Court. Before I begin my comments on this troubling issue, I'd like to thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak this evening. I consider myself to be a dutiful servant of the great country and a steward of government funds and a proud resident of this beach. However, I'm very disheartened and disappointed regarding the ongoing negative treatment by the River Haven neighborhood toward the Woodards. But I'm even more concerned about how that activity has garnered some misguided support for breaking the law with respect to the illegal encroachments on 1700 River Court. As referenced earlier of the City Code, Chapter 33, Article 1, it clearly states that these large encroachments on public property were built in blatant disregard for that very same law. I know there's discussion about and debate, but I'm not a lawyer. As I understand, these encroachments were purposely built without a permit. Now, my biggest question is, why are we wasting the taxpayers' money, the city council's time, as well as the city employees' time to entertain encroachment applications for somebody that broke the law? I didn't write the law. It doesn't make sense. In fact, I want to be clear. I will send a message to everyone in Virginia Beach by finding the owners of 1700 River Court, removing their encroachment off city property, as it's stated in the city code, and then restore the land back to its original state so the city can now address the entire unsafe road condition, despite popular opinion. Again, once these encroachments are removed, the space will be there to build the street, build the cul-de-sac as initially intended on public record. I also trust and strongly recommend that actions taken to resolve the unsafe road condition in River Court be aligned with the vision of Virginia Beach, of all Virginia Beach residents, and the principles thereof, especially those of diverse, distinctive neighborhoods and effective transportation. In conclusion, I strongly recommend that you deny the encroachment application for 1700 River Court and send a clear message to the owners of this property, as well as other residents of Virginia Beach, including myself, that illegally taking and building on public property will not be tolerated. I built my house. I didn't encroach. I also strongly urge you to live up to your promise in the vision statement, which in this case means to build a safe, well-designed road on River Court. Thank you for allowing this opportunity for me to speak.
Thank you, Commander. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, Your Honor. Reverend Dr. Ray Cox.
I am speaking
And your name, sir?
Dr. James Allen.
Thank you. I have you listed next.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. James Allen. I'm an associate minister at New Hope Baptist Church, where my pastor is the Dr. E. Ray Cox Sr. I also serve as the social action coordinator for the Virginia Beach Ministers Conference. And speaking on behalf of the Minister Conference's 20 churches or so, and the thousands of members that we minister to, we try very hard to partner with neighborhoods and associations so that our congregants can be informed electoral people. And what we have come to speak on this issue is there is a multitude of reasons and concerns that trouble us here. First and foremost, we're concerned about the potential financial hardship which could be placed upon the city's already tight budget if this council should approve the encroachment application. We firmly believe that the failure of this council to uphold the law and assure that the Woodard family can receive emergency services and proper transportation and bus services for their children will result in a costly civil action. Such action could cost the cities millions of tax dollars, which should not be spent on an issue that should have and could have been handled on departmental levels by the zoning department and the permit department. In addition, the Virginia Beach Interdenominational Ministers Conference is concerned with the appearance that some of our elected and appointed officials have turned a blind eye to this circumstance for a number of years. As Mr. Woodard has already disclosed, he has investigated and informed numerous public officials, including members of this council, about these illegal encroachments, and a number of city officials have turned a deaf ear. Citizens have every right to believe and expect that the law will be upheld for every citizen and that there would not be special considerations for a selective few. A failure to enforce the city code in this instance speaks enormously about the unprofessionalism the way this was handled. the encroachments were not a part of the approved original plans for the Lions. Third, the ministers' conference and our congregations are concerned about the precedent that this council would set by approving such a petition. Does this council really want to set the precedent of people illegally taking public land and improving it for their own private use? What happens if a builder or a developer or another individual decides to take public land and decide to develop it for their own private use? Does this council intend to allow others, no matter who they are, to circumvent the process of going through the planning and permit process? I would imagine that everybody in this council is aware of what it takes to build a home nowadays, and you can't do anything without the proper permits and the proper inspections, step by step by step. Therefore, the ministers of the Virginia Beach Interdenominational Conference are confident that our fair and just city council members will do the right and proper thing and deny the encroachment application. In addition, we ask that a directive be issued demanding the immediate removal of all encroachments from the public right-of-way and the street to be restored to its original condition. We ask that the city manager personally oversee the removal of these encroachments and that this action not be delegated to someone else. All expenses to return the property to its original condition should be at the expense of the Lions.
Sir, your
Yes, sir.
time's up.
Thank you very much. I believe you all have the idea of what I'm trying to say here. And in the name of Jesus, we trust that you would do the right thing.
That's all except the rebuttal, Your Honor.
Mr. Burdon, would you like to rebuttal?
I'll be brief, Mr. Vice Mayor. First of all, I don't know that anybody up here didn't understand it, but I guess some didn't. The applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Lyon, when they applied for their permits, their site plan and their building permit, the plans that they submitted had what is there now on them, and they were approved by the city of Virginia Beach. No one, certainly not the Lions, was trying to get away with anything. They were enhancing with permeable paver driveway, everyone's allowed that, and landscaping, and two, not five, two landscape homes that were on the approved landscape plan as submitted. All the driveway, the circular driveway, everything was all on the approved site plans that were approved. And the reality is, I represented Mr. and Mrs. Hanson, who owned the property that Mr. Woodard and his wife now own. And Mr. and Mrs. Hanson had no objection then and would have no objection now if they still owned the property to what my clients constructed pursuant to their plan, inspected, as Mr. Moss said, the whole process. They weren't getting away with anything. They weren't violating any law. This is not a public park. This is an excess city right-of-way. And our city ordinances require that everyone, homeowner adjoining a public right-of-way, that they maintain the unimproved excess right-of-way in front of their house. That's a requirement of our city ordinance, and that's what this was. The last gentleman who spoke returned it to its original condition. Its original condition was, dirt, some scrub, because it hadn't been improved. No one had lived in the property for some time. It wasn't a right-of-way. It wasn't a paved street. Was never a paved street. So all this bluster and rhetoric about stealing public property is frankly absurd. None of that has occurred whatsoever. And had the Lions known, they would have applied back then and would have been approved on consent without a problem. Now, I'll finish with one thing. I've tried to keep this as positive as I can possibly keep it. But I want to mention, because both Mr. Bischoff and Mr. Woodard brought it up, the 6-foot fence that Mr. Woodard has in front of his house is not permitted under our zoning ordinance. Only 4-foot fences are permitted in the setback. Our city, at their request, without making them go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I've never seen that in 33 years, approved them to have a 6-foot fence. And that's okay. I mean, they use the ADA as their reason, and they got a 6-foot fence, but I've never seen anybody do it before. And they don't have any excess right-of-way in front of the street like the Lions do that's unimproved. But they've gotten lots of very fair treatment from the city staff in their concerns about their daughter, which are legitimate concerns. But they just conveniently didn't mention the fact that they have a 6-foot fence. They also put a 6-foot fence up again, and forgot to mention this, the Hansons were well aware of the strange configuration, of the little triangle in front of my client's
Mr.
property.
Burdon.
Okay, I'll shut
Time.
up. Thank you all. Thank you.
Your Honor, Mr. Jackson has called to our attention that Mr. Allen should have had 10 minutes because he was representing 20 churches. I'm just offering you what he said.
I don't think that's the rule.
No, it's not.
10 minutes, you speak for approval.
Mr. Wood?
Thanks, Mr. Vice Mayor. You know, this has been an interesting voyage for all of us, I think. I will tell you, I need to address some of the comments on the opposition. First off, the special treatment, and as Mr. Burdon alluded to, there's been an inordinate amount of staff time spent on this project, and frankly, it's been for both the Woodard family and the Line family. You know, and Mr. Burdon alludes to the reason that that the Woodard family actually got additional meetings with the city manager and city attorney staff and things like that, and that's fine. I mean, that's what we're here for. You know, the other issue about the average citizens and, you know, certain neighborhoods getting special treatment, I would dare say that every person up here has been to Green Run, has been to Burton Station, has been to SeaTac. And I will tell you, me, representing Lynn Haven District for the last 13 years, couldn't tell you where River Court was until about 2 months ago. So that kind of gives you an idea of the difference there. But going back to the average taxpayers that Mr. Bischoff mentioned, you know, these average taxpayers bring forward 25 encroachment applications a year. And this is the data I got from Public Works Real Estate yesterday. 25 encroachment applications a year. 100% of them are approved either administratively or through the council. That's the way it is. They come to us. This is not an unusual thing. It's not something that's restricted to River Court. It's not something that's restricted to any other place in the city. An encroachment by definition is a structure in the city right-of-way, and it is something that is common in older neighborhoods with narrow streets. You know, the opposition talks, again, so much of this is easily refuted, and that's probably what gets people a little worked up. You know, first off, you know, I appreciate the fact a master police officer came down and visited River Court. However, master police officer is not a traffic engineer, nor does he drive a fire truck. In fact, the fire chief provided an email that says this is to confirm the fire department can gain necessary access to the structures located on River Court for fire suppression or EMS service delivery. While access could be considered tight, it is not unlike many other streets within the city. Our department is well known for our capabilities to provide necessary firefighting and EMS service delivery measures in a myriad of situations across the city. I didn't know Chief Cover knew the word myriad, but that's also an interesting thing there. It's typical throughout my district. As Mr. Burdon pointed out, Little Neck, the North End, Shore Drive area, and for goodness sakes, fire trucks go through the Cape Story by the Sea 4th of July parade, and those are some very narrow roads. The other question is school board, or school bus access, excuse me. You know, the very simple one-line sentence from Dale Holt, who's Chief Operations Officer and used to be the principal of First Colonial when my kids were there. Our driver successfully made the three-point turn on River Court. That's available there. So we know we can deliver emergency or provide emergency services. We can pick up children. It works. So then we take a look at the support we have here. We've got nearly 100 neighbor signatures in support. And I think most of us who have served here, typically when we get these 100 signatures, they're against something. It's a lot harder to get people to sign in support of something. I know I have, and I imagine the rest of us have received dozens of emails and phone calls in support of this going on just up till a little while ago. That also weighs on us, and the fact that we have a great showing from the neighbors here is also important. Then, you know, it can't be denied regardless, and Mr. Moss brought this up. This document shows a landscape plan that was submitted to the city, and it very clearly shows this encroachment. Now, why this happened, I don't know. That's an issue that shouldn't have happened, but it did. You know, I don't think it was any nefarious plot on the part of the Lions, and I'll tell you, if you look at the very last page and it lists this plant list, that's a very impressive, and Mr. Frankenfield can tell you that's probably an extraordinarily expensive plant list, and, you know, I don't know that anybody would want to spend that kind of money improving the city right-of-way, which is frankly what they did. So having said all that, Mr. Vice Mayor, I'd move for approval of the encroachment application.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. I'd like to make a comment. I think often we tend to forget that city easement means that the people own the underlying property. That's still a private property. The right-of-way means that the city decides to use it and exercise it, but otherwise is. So I think often here, when we think about whether it's either applicant, we ought to always be trying to let people use their property rights that they have if it doesn't create a deleterious situation to the neighbors. Clearly, this does not. I think the Lions act in good faith. I concur with Jim. We don't know why it happened, but it did. But we are resolving this the right way, I believe. And I know that everybody's unfortunate that they're all here tonight when they could be home doing something else. But I do applaud both sides for saying here, but I would hope that other people watching from other neighborhoods maybe could find that there is a good way to get it done. And Shannon, you're right. The staff goes out everywhere. And Louis and I live in a neighborhood with some very tight streets. And I know there's encroachments, but so what? That's why we're here, is to make people's life easy, not to make their life more difficult. So I'm happy to second that good explanation you gave, Mr. Woods.
Any more comments by council? If not, the vote is open.
With the mayor being absent, the vote is 9-1.
All right, we'll now go to the planning item, item K2. I Telecom Infrastructure T LLC and JSW Holdings LLC, Princess Anne District.
Actually, I have a concern that maybe we can just address this concern and not have to hear the whole application. And if you want to do it that way, and Ms. Murphy, I think maybe you might be just the right person to help resolve this, because we've been through this.
Are you Ms. Murphy?
Okay.
She's representing everyone.
If I can just explain what my concern is. And we spent, I know the council well remembers, we spent over a year dealing with a pole that was too close to residential. And this particular proposed pole technically meets our requirement because it says that it should not be, that it must be at least 125% of the height of the pole from any existing residential. And the residential that's on this lot is considerably away from the pole and is farther back. But the width of this application puts the pole only 53 feet from the side yard. And right now, there's not an existing residential on the property next to it. But my concern is that any property, that use of that property will be restricted because, well, maybe not restricted because they're not existing, but residential houses that are built in there are going to be closer and may well be like the folks that we heard from for over a year in the Crown Castle case, who say, well, you can't put this pole close to my house. Maybe there is something that we can do that would prevent this from happening, and that's what I would ask if you have some suggestion. I know that this particular property owner owns some other properties. They wouldn't happen to own this adjoining property, would they?
I don't believe that they do. The JSW, and for the record, my name is Lisa Murphy. I'm a local attorney here on behalf of the applicant. It's my understanding that the property that we've made the application on is JSW Holdings, LLC. The principal of that company is a gentleman named Frank Walton.
Yes.
And he's the son of the Frank Walton that the group mentioned that just passed away recently. Otherwise, he
Joseph Walton.
Joseph Walton. Otherwise, he would have actually been here tonight. I believe there are other family members who own property. I do not know. Eddie Burdon told us that Harry Perky's client owns this piece.
and then there's a strip over here. Everything around it is, as you know, is agriculturally zoned.
Right,
So-
but it's all, right now, I think, in the process of being rezoned, or some portions of it, to residential. And I just don't want to put some other property owner in this situation. I know that there's property out there that's wetlands. Could it be that some of this property is impacted by wetlands? I know some of the property out there is going to be impacted by the proposed London Bridge Road extended. I don't know if that's the property next to it. I'm just hoping that there's some situation that is going to protect that property from having to deal with this pole that close to the property line. And I just didn't know if we would have an opportunity to check any of those facts, because I would hate for this adjoining property owner to wake up one day and say, whoops, my property is so close to this pole, there's not going to be, or a residential use of that property will be difficult because it's so close to this pole, as we went through. And with all the experience that we had with that other one, is there anything you can suggest that we could put as a condition or in building this pole that would make it a safe, would make it a stronger safety factor so that we don't have this concern?
Well, okay, well, let me address that. And so I had the engineers, and I'll go ahead and hand this. I had the engineers go ahead and design or show a proposal with an extra safety factor built in so that the monopole, and we're talking about a 120-foot monopole, would be designed to collapse within the applicant's property. So that's certainly something that we can do. The collector, it's my understanding, and staff can probably help, I think the collector is to come through actually no, somewhere in around this area, so it does impact this property a little bit. The Princess Anne Meadows development, from my understanding, is this and the other side over closer to Holland Road. I've spoken with them, and this obviously would have no impact on their development and have no issues with that. So we're really just talking about this property and this property. Again, they're agriculturally zoned. If somebody were to come that wanted to do residential development, obviously they would have to have a rezoning. It's been suggested that perhaps this parcel would be commercially zoned just because it'll be closer to the connector. I think the challenge is we don't know, and that's why the zoning ordinance specifically has a setback from existing residential structures, because we don't know specifically with these how or whether they would be developed with residential structures. The Crown case, as you know, was quite unique in the sense that there was a 280-foot guide tower that was built on parcels that were later modified, or the use permit for those was modified so that those homes could be built. So those homes are actually on the property that the tower's on. So it is.
One of them was. But, we can, I just don't want to make the same mistake twice. And if there's something that we can do to keep from doing that, that's what I was looking for. Because the way our ordinance reads, the pole has to have 125% setback from any existing residence. But I think we could find that anyone purchasing a house on one of these other properties would then someday say, why didn't you make them follow the ordinance and for safety purposes have 125%, which would be, I guess in this case, 160 feet from any residence. And so the burden is going to be on the adjoining property to provide that separation, and that seems to be an unfair burden to put on another property owner. And if it just seemed if there was something that we could do to prevent that from being the burden. Could we possibly defer this for 2 weeks and see if there's some situation that we could impose as a condition that would make this an acceptable situation, that we are preventing these other property owners from having to make the accommodation for this? That would be an unfair imposition on them.
We could certainly consider a 2-week deferral. I do want to clarify, though, that as far as the zoning ordinance, and I understand your point, but what we don't know is how those other properties are going to be developed.
Well, that's for sure.
And I
But
think-
this may cause them not to be able to get a rezoning that they prefer. And that's what, I mean, if this were commercial, then it doesn't apply. However, it's not, and I don't think, we certainly don't want commercial curb cuts onto Princess Anne Road. So we've got a lot of unknowns in that, with all that quadrant, and that's been a lot of the problem that we are having with the proposed rezoning. I just know how difficult it was dealing with Crown Castle for so long, and I think we've got some unhappy residents over there because we didn't resolve their issue, and if we could just prevent it from happening again, it just seemed to me to be the better thing to do.
And again, we can certainly take some additional time on this, but I do want to say, as far as the property rights issues, we're dealing with an existing zoning ordinance. If the zoning ordinance were to change, obviously that changes all the rules. But, we've worked for a very long time with staff. We worked with Christopher Farms subdivision, met with them. Each of the property owners who would be adjacent property owners got notices at the Planning Commission meeting, got notices at the City Council meeting.
Okay, so maybe you can get me a letter from each of them saying that they understand the situation and they accept it. If we deferred for 2 weeks, we're within our time that we're required, because I think we're required to act on something dealing with the tower within 150 days, and 100 and some odd days have already passed. So if it's acceptable with the council, I would ask that we defer it for 2 weeks and attempt to address a situation that, maybe we can prevent a problem.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Were there any other speakers?
Yes, sir, I had 2 other speakers, but they were in favor.
I'm sorry?
I had 2 other speakers, but they're in favor.
They're in favor of the application?
Zach Shepard and Olongado Landon.
They're the T-Mobile's RF engineer, as well as the applicant.
So they're with you?
Your Honor, if we could put a date on it, which would be November the 3rd. instead of
November
2 weeks,
3rd.
In case we have a problem with the dates.
November 3rd, all right with you, Ms. Murphy?
I'd
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, vote, no further discussion, the vote's open.
Who seconded the motion? I didn't.
I did.
Ms. Wilson?
Okay, thank you. The vote is 10-0 with the mayor being absent.
All right, would you make the nominations, the 2 here? Ask Mrs. Wilson to make the appointment nominations.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'd like to nominate 2 students for the Historic Preservation Commission. One is Chloe Cohen, who is a senior at First Colonial High School, and the other is Taylor Levin, who's a senior at Bayside High School.
Are there any further nominations? If not, the vote's open.
By a vote of 10-0, you have made the appointments of the students to the Historical Preservation Commission.
And then, Mr. Vice Mayor, I'd like to nominate for the Historical Review Board Damian Seitz.
Any further nominations? The vote is open.
1 second, please. I'm sorry. It's open now.
By a vote,
Press the green button.
by a vote of 10-0, you have
Thank you.
you have elected Damon Seitz to the Historical Review Board.
Is there any further business to come before the council? If not, meeting's adjourned.